we're going to have what are called fixed costs. We're going to have what's called variable cost. And we're going to have what's called total cost. And then ultimately, we're going to take these things and make averages, and then we're going to find the average version. Of course, the word average means you divide by quantity, right? So a free throw percentage is an average. And just like a batting average is the same thing. It's a percentage of. And so we'll learn to calculate that. So the definitions of these are easy. Fixed costs are stuck, meaning they don't change. That's why we use the word fixed. And so the one thing that you're going to find in economics is that the main definition of short run versus long run is going to come down to the definition of a fixed cost. We can't put a time frame on short run versus long run. That's not the way it works. Instead, what we're going to say is that in the short run, we have a fixed cost. In other words, one of our costs is stuck. We can't change one of our costs. In the long run, what we'll say is that we have no fixed costs. In other words, we can change anything. So we're not going to put time frames of short run versus long run. In the short run, we're stuck with something, so we have to deal with it. In the long run, we don't have anything stuck. We're going to be able to make changes. Okay, so that's fixed costs. They are stuck and they do not change. Then we have variable costs. Variable costs change with output. And so as our output goes up, variable costs will also go up. Remember, output is quantity, product is output, and so these things are all interchangeable. And so variable costs, they change with output. And so as I produce more stuff with my business, what you're going to see is that costs are going to start to go up. Costs will go up because you're producing more stuff, meaning you need more materials, you need more workers, et cetera, et cetera. The variable costs of production are usually the lion's share. That means the biggest part. Finally, you have total costs, which is a sum of fixed costs plus variable costs. And so this is our first formula for the unit. Total costs equals fixed costs plus variable cost. And moving forward, then what we're going to do is we're going to start to draw a few graphs so that we can identify these things visually. In the long run here, for us, not in terms of economics, we need to be able to draw these things and we need to be able to calculate these things. So we're going to teach some formulas to do this, but this first formula right here that we've done right there, total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost, notice we can move it around with algebra to find these things. And we will eventually do that. And so looking at fixed costs then, so fixed cost is going to equal total cost minus variable cost. It's the same formula, just moved around. And then variable cost equals total cost minus fixed cost. Again, same formula, just the variable is moved around. So on your note sheet, then that's those definitions. And so I'm just taking a quick look at the note sheet. We do have marginal cost there still. And so we're going to hold off on marginal cost in terms of a definition, but the word marginal, you know what that means already. What I'd like to do now is kind of erase this part, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the averages in there with it. And so we're going to get rid of this, and then what you're going to see is that we also have what is called average fixed cost. Then we have what's called average variable cost, and then we also have what is called average total cost. And my markers don't want to write very well right now. And so the word average, when we apply it to this, means we're dividing by the quantity. And so average fixed cost equals fixed cost divided by quantity. And I guess I should do this to make it a little more clear. And it is that easy. It is that easy. And so when we move forward, then it's going to be about learning these definitions before we start doing the math. Remember, fixed costs are costs that stay the same. Average variable cost, then AVC equals your variable cost divided by the quantity. And finally, average total cost, I'm going to move it over here. ATC equals your total cost divided by the quantity. And so basically on the board here, then you have 4 formulas that matter. You have these average formulas, and then you have this guy here that you need to remember. Remember, on an AP exam, they do not let you have a formula sheet, that you do not get a calculator. And so these are formulas that we have to practice so that we can remember how to use them. AP usually doesn't make you calculate these things. Instead, usually what they make you do is interpret graphs where they're drawn, which is what we're going to do next. So I am recording this, and I'm going to put the video up, and then we're going to watch a video about this. So I'm going to erase this now so I can draw the graphs. I'm going to leave the formulas here. If that's all right with you, then I'm going to erase everything over here. And I'm going to rewrite the one formula over here that you do need. Remember, that was total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. And then what we're going to do is we're going to draw a basic graph here, and then you're going to get a feel for what you're going to be up against. It's not going to be everything. We're just going to draw a graph. What we're going to do is we're going to just draw what's called a perfectly competitive firm. And over here, we're going to have the money, and down here, we're going to have the quantity. Now, over here, you could say money, you could say costs, either one of the two. They always work. It's all interchangeable because it's money. And then for the individual firm, then, what we have to learn to do is to apply the graphs to these. And so I'm going to graph the average numbers here, because the average numbers are the ones that typically are what we need the most. And we're going to start with average total cost. Average total cost, when we draw the graph, is always going to look like a smiley face, ATC. It's going to look like this because of that law of diminishing returns. What that means is, in the beginning, we're going to see that average cost does go down. It hits its vertex because this is a parabola, but then it eventually starts to go up. Average total cost always looks like that. And so it's just a smiley face. Notice I'm not doing all the math, and I'm not plotting it. I'm just going straight to drawing it. That's what you're going to have to do. You're going to need to understand why it looks like that, though. And so that's average total cost. Then we have average fixed cost. Now, remember what I said, average fixed cost always stays the same. That means average fixed cost is going to go down like so forever, approaching the x-axis. If you recall from maybe an algebra class or trig or whatever, that's an asymptote, meaning then that it approaches 0, but it never hits 0. This is how businesses like Southwest make money. Southwest pays $45 million for one jet. That's a fixed cost. They just pay that $45 million for one jet. It's a fixed cost. And so how do they make money if that's how much it costs? And so the way that you do it is if you fly it by one flight, right? Then what that means, and I'm finding the average fixed cost right now. What that means then is it's going to be $45 million still on the average. But if I take 2 flights with the plane, now it's lower. That goes in, it's $22.5 million. And if you take 9 flights, now your average is only $5 million, right? Because 9 times 5 is 45. As you see then, the average is getting lower, 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 lower. And if we divided it by 1,000 flights, that means that the 0 comes over 2 spots. Now it's, what is that, 450,000, I think? And if we take 10,000 flights, now you're only at 45,000. You see, this is how businesses like Southwest make money, because they make their average fixed cost go down because they're using the same item over and over and over. And so that's just to show you why the average fixed cost goes lower, lower, and lower forever. Again, that is an asymptote, and that means it approaches 0, but it never hits 0. It could get minuscule, but it'll never hit 0. These are our 2 of 3 of our averages. And the last one, then we have the average variable cost. The average variable. Average variable is going to be a parabola like your average total, and it's going to look like so. The distance is going to be big at the beginning, and then it's going to get more narrow as we go this way. And the reason it's going to be more narrow is because if you recall, total is a sum, correct, of fixed plus variable. And that means your average total always is going to equal your average variable cost plus your average fixed cost. And again, we'll do math on this to practice it. But that means that the gap here is going to be equal to the size of the average. And since we said this is forever getting smaller, that means over here it's going to get narrow as well. So the distance here is going to be the same as the distance there in terms of the math. It's not drawn to scale. This is the beginning of your costs. And so one last thing, just looking at the one that matters the most. When I graph this stuff for you, and then when we're doing the math or the graphing in class, this is going to be the one that matters 99.9% of the time. Average total cost matters because it's this where we use to calculate profit. And so that's going to be the heart and soul of this. It's going to be learning to calculate profit, learning to calculate revenue. And average total cost is the main tool that we use to do that. There is one more cost, that is marginal cost. We said we'd kind of skip that. Marginal cost is going to be the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. And so we'll cross that bridge later, but here's what it's always going to look like mathematically. Your marginal cost is always going to do this. Marginal cost actually equals your supply curve as well. This is always going to happen. This is a mathematical truth of economics. Your marginal cost will always intersect the ATC at the vertex. And it does this because average total cost is a function of your marginal cost. And so this is where we leave you then. Right here, we said that this matters in terms of vocabulary. This time period is called it's called economies of scale. That means very simply that as we add quantity, our average cost is going down. Over here, we see that the average total cost is going up. This is referred to as diseconomies of scale. What that means is as we add more quantity, now our average total cost is going up. So basically, this is very good for the business. This is very bad for the business because we want costs low, not high. Remember, we said our whole point of this is that businesses are trying to make profit. They use the average total cost to make profit. So they're analyzing where their costs are low. They're analyzing when their costs start to go up, and then they do things accordingly. One last bit of vocabulary, and then we're going to be done with this graph for today. Right here, this spot is the low point of the MC. This is also a vertex because technically that's a parabola. This is what we call the point of diminishing returns. There's that word again. It came up in your production function. This is the point of diminishing returns because now our marginal cost is going up. Marginal in economics means one additional. That means as we add one additional quantity, our cost per unit is starting to go up. As this drives up, it's going to start to bend this way. As this goes further, it bends the whole thing that way. Remember, average total cost is a function of marginal. We can make an analogy for you. Your high school GPA is an average. So if everybody in this class has a B GPA, a 3.0, let's pretend, that's your average. My class, AP Economics, is one additional class. My class is your marginal class. And so if you have a 3.0 GPA and you get an A in my class, that means then that your marginal class was above your GPA, so your GPA is going to bend up. My class is your marginal class. So if you have a B GPA and you get a C in my class, that means your GPA is going to bend down. The moral of the story is marginal dictates average. And what that means is if it comes in above or below your average, then it's going to bend the average. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the vocabulary for today. Does anybody want to ask any questions about anything that we just reviewed?